Michael Walker sat on the rustling paper of the exam table, his hands resting quietly in his lap as he waited for the doctor. It was his annual physical, a routine he had religiously followed every year since he turned 40. The sterile smell of disinfectant hung in the air, and the muffled voices of nurses drifted down the hallway, creating a background hum of activity in the clinic. Michael's gaze slid to a poster on the opposite wall, explaining the importance of screenings. He had read it dozens of times during previous appointments, but today his mind was elsewhere. He checked the time on his phone, almost 10:30, and his wife, Sarah, had texted him earlier, wishing him luck, though there was nothing particularly exciting about a routine physical. "Hope the doctor doesn't poke you too hard. Love you," she joked, adding a smiley face. Michael smiled faintly, remembering her teasing. They'd been married for 17 years, and her playful attention still warmed his heart. He texted her back quickly, then put his phone away. In his mind, he ran through his to-do list. Stop at the hardware store after the appointment, pick Emily up from piano practice at 5 p.m., and be home in time for Jacob's baseball game at 7. It was a lot to do, but Michael loved it every crazy, joyful minute of raising 3 kids. Ethan, their eldest, who was 16, might roll his eyes when his dad showed up to his debates or basketball games, but Michael never missed a single one. Emily, 13, was more outgoing. She'd hug him in front of his friends without hesitation, which always made him smile. And Jacob, who was only 8, still insisted that his dad put him to bed with a story about superheroes. Thinking about his kids filled Michael's chest with a deep sense of satisfaction. Fatherhood was his pride and joy, his whole purpose in life. He remembered Ethan's first wobbly steps toward him, Emily's first ballet performance when she blew him a kiss from the stage, and Jacob's first word, "Daddy," of course. Michael had always been there. Being a father was what defined him. It gave his life a meaning greater than any career ambition or personal goal. There was a soft knock on the door. Michael straightened up. "Come in," he called. Dr. David Lee opened the door with a warm smile on his face. "Good morning, Michael," he said as he entered the office. Dr. Lee was a friendly man in his 50s, with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Michael's doctor for 10 years, long enough to make casual conversation about the day-to-day happenings. He held a clipboard with Michael's medical records. "Good morning, doctor," Michael replied. "How are Sarah and the children?" the doctor asked, disinfecting his hands. He began the examination by measuring blood pressure and pulse. "Everything is fine. The kids keep us busy, you know," Michael chuckled. "Ethan recently got his driver's license, so pray for us." Dr. Lee laughed. "Oh yeah, teenagers driving are quite a challenge." He fastened the blood pressure cuff on Michael's arm. "Take a deep breath." As the cuff squeezed his hand, Michael inhaled. "To be honest, they are good. There is nothing to complain about. We are lucky." "You were lucky with your upbringing, too," Dr. Lee corrected with a wink, looking at the numbers. 120 to 80, just like the textbook says. Michael smiled. The examination continued as usual. Eyes, ears, reflexes. The doctor listened to the heart and lungs, felt the abdomen, making casual conversation about recent baseball games. "Have there been any changes in your health since last year?" the doctor asked, making a note on his tablet. Michael shook his head. "Overall, I feel fine. Maybe I get tired a little faster, but that's probably my age. Or just kids." The doctor nodded. "We'll do a blood test, see if everything is okay. Maybe it's the thyroid, maybe it's just stress. What about the rest? Joints, nutrition, exercise. Nothing to complain about. I try to run a couple of times a week, and I coach Jacob's team when I have time." Michael hesitated, then added, "Actually, there is one thing I would like to ask about. It is not a problem, but rather a life decision." "Yes?" The doctor looked up, looking at him with interest. Michael cleared his throat. "Sarah and I thought, we have 3 wonderful children, and we feel like our family is complete. We don't have any more plans." "I understand," Dr. Lee nodded. 3 is a lot. And what did you decide?" "I'm thinking about a vasectomy," Michael said, feeling awkward even though he knew the procedure was common. Since I'm here, I thought I'd ask and maybe get a referral if you think it's wise. The doctor nodded understandingly. Many men choose this path when they are sure that they do not want more children. If you are really sure, vasectomy is safe and effective. I can refer you to a urologist. Michael felt a wave of relief. Excellent. I've already read a little about this, but I'd like to hear a doctor's opinion. Certainly. The doctor began to explain the basics: outpatient procedure, small incisions, minimal recovery. Michael already knew a lot of it, but he listened carefully. After all, this was an important decision. There will be a consultation first, the doctor continued. Usually they do a test before and after, just to make sure everything is okay. At these words, he suddenly fell silent, frowned slightly, as if he remembered something. He looked at the map, then back at Michael. By the way, since you're here, we can do a preliminary analysis now, before the referral. It's not necessary, but many couples feel more at ease when they have basic data. Okay, Michael said, surprised. Right now? Dr. Lee laughed. Not right now. I'll give you a container and you can use the toilet at the end of the hall. We have a lab here. The results will be back in a few days. Michael shrugged. Why not? Okay, let's go. After a few awkward minutes, armed with a plastic container and a fair amount of embarrassment, Michael dropped off the sample in a special restroom. He handed it to a lab technician who promised quick results and returned to the exam room, where Dr. Lee was finishing up his examination. From what I can see, everything is fine, the doctor said, washing his hands. We'll call you when the blood tests and other results are ready. If everything is normal, I'll give you a referral to a urologist and you'll continue with him. Is that okay? Suitable. Thank you, doctor. They shook hands. Michael hopped off the table, pleased with how smoothly everything had gone. As he left the clinic, he hadn't imagined that anything could go wrong. It had been a routine visit. He'd even waved at the receptionists and was already dialing Sarah to tell her he'd treat himself to a cup of coffee before stopping at the store. He had no idea that just a few days later, this routine checkup would destroy his world. 3 days later, Michael was at work. He was checking his email at his desk on a slow afternoon when his cell phone rang. The number for Dr. Lee's clinic appeared on the screen. He quickly excused himself and went into the empty conference room to answer it. Hello, Michael said, feeling his heart beat a little faster. He was expecting routine test results, maybe a cholesterol reminder or something. Hello, Michael, this is Dr. Lee, came the doctor's calm voice. Do you have a minute? Of course, doctor. Is something wrong? Michael tried to remain calm, but there was something in Dr. Lee's tone that made his fingers tighten around the phone. There was a short pause. Blood tests are normal, Dr. Lee said. Kidneys, liver, cholesterol, everything is fine. That's good, Michael said slowly. He felt the but coming. Yes, but I would like you to come to the clinic to discuss the results of another test. Michael felt a pang in his stomach. Analysis. He had almost forgotten about it, caught up in the daily grind. Something wrong. Another pause. It's better to discuss this in person. Can you come by today? Michael felt a chill in his chest. Doctors don't invite you in person for good news. I can. I'm leaving now. Doctor, is everything okay? You're scaring me. Dr. Lee's voice remained calm, but there was a softness to it. We'll talk when you arrive. Drive carefully, Michael. I'll see you as soon as you arrive. The call ended, and Michael stared at the phone, his thoughts racing. He grabbed his jacket, told his colleague he had urgent personal business, and hurried out. It was only a 10-minute drive to the clinic, but with each street he passed, increasingly dire scenarios began to form in his head. What could his test show that required such an urgent visit? Cancer? Infection? By the time he parked, his palms were wet with sweat. He sat in the car, breathing deeply. Probably nothing serious, he muttered out loud. Maybe a problem with the sample. Found an infection. It's treatable. Everything's fine. He realized he was speaking out loud and forced himself to shut up. The silence that followed was worse, with only the heavy beating of his heart to be heard. Inside the clinic, the girl at the reception immediately recognized him and looked at him with sympathy. "Dr. Lee will see you any minute, Mr. Walker." Michael nodded. It struck him that she must have been warned in advance to let him in without waiting. He walked past the other patients and into the same office as last time. The familiarity of the place, the same rustling paper on the couch, the same faint smell of antiseptic brought no comfort. When Dr. Lee came in, he was no longer smiling. "Hello, Michael," he said, and quietly closed the door behind him. Michael immediately jumped up from his chair, unable to sit still. "Doc, what's going on? You're scaring me." He tried to smile, but it came out strained and empty. Dr. Lee motioned for him to sit down and sat down in the wheeled chair opposite him. In the silence that followed, Michael glanced at the tablet in the doctor's hands, hoping to see some kind of clue. The screen flashed with numbers and terms that meant nothing to him. "I'm sorry to worry you," Dr. Lee began, "but I wanted to talk to you in person because the results were unexpected." Michael felt as if the floor had dropped out from under his feet. He leaned his palms on his knees. "Okay, just tell me." The doctor took a deep breath. "We got the results of the analysis. It showed azoospermia. This means that no reproductive cells were found in the sample." Michael blinked. The word meant nothing to him. "Without reproductive ones, this can't be. Maybe I did the test incorrectly." He almost laughed at the absurdity of his own words. "I have 3 children, Doctor." He looked at the doctor with hope, hoping to catch in his face signs of a mistake or an inappropriate joke. Dr. Lee nodded with a tense smile that held no hint of humor. "I know. That's why I asked the lab to retest it, and I rechecked it myself." The result was the same. Michael's ears began to ring. "Twice," he repeated, dumbfounded. "I also did a hormonal blood test," Dr. Lee continued. "The levels of FSH, a hormone associated with sperm production, are elevated. This indicates that the body is trying to compensate for the lack of sperm. In addition, we tested for genetic markers. The results indicate the likelihood of an inherited genetic condition that causes male infertility from birth." Michael looked at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. His mouth was dry. What genetic condition? What does that mean?" Dr. Lee cleared his throat carefully. "There is such a thing as congenital absence of the vas deferens. Simply put, it means that the tubes that carry your substances out of the testicles did not form before birth. This is one possible explanation. It is often associated with carrying mutations in the cystic fibrosis gene, even in men who do not have the disease. Such men are usually infertile from birth. In fact, about 98% of men with cystic fibrosis or its genetic mutations cannot conceive a child naturally." Each word sounded like a hammer, driving nails into Michael's very understanding of his life. He was caught up in a detailed cystic fibrosis. Wasn't that a serious illness? But he didn't have it. A sharp thought struck infertility from birth. But Michael's voice was thin, and he noticed his hands were shaking. He clenched his fists. "But I have children. We never did F or anything. We didn't even plan the first one. Ethan just showed up. You delivered Jacob yourself, you know that." Panic and anger filled his voice. "So how can I be infertile? Maybe I became infertile after the children were born. Maybe it's something recent." Dr. Lee shook his head regretfully. "Hormonal levels and genetic testing indicate a congenital nature. It's not something that appears suddenly or changes with age. If the diagnosis is confirmed, it means you were born unable to conceive." He softened his tone. "I understand how shocking this is." Michael wanted to either scream or laugh. He didn't know which. Everything started spinning in his head. Never been able to conceive a child. He turned the phrase over and over in his mind, hoping that if he repeated it enough times, it would start to make sense. It didn't. It was absurd. It was like telling someone standing in the bright sun that it was midnight. It couldn't be true, because reality said otherwise. In his reality, there were 3 children with his eyes and his mother's dimples. Weren't there? He remembered Ethan's strong jaw, just like his father's. He remembered how Emily had eyes like Sarah's, but the dimple in her cheek. Wasn't that his? He thought so. People always said that children looked like Michael in their build, their nose. Or did he just take that on faith? A wild, unwanted thought began to creep into his consciousness. Doubt. Michael, Dr. Lee said quietly, bringing him out of his thoughts. Is it possible? I have to ask. Is there even the slightest possibility that the children are not yours biologically? The question hung in the air, unbearable. Michael stared at the doctor as if he had grown a second head. No, he said, and then louder, more forcefully, no, it's impossible. My wife and I, we've always been faithful to each other. I mean, he paused, his mind desperately searching for support. I would know if, I would know. It's out of the question, absolutely not. Dr. Lee raised his hands to show that he was not making any accusations. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Michael. But from a medical point of view, I can't explain it any other way. You said you didn't seek medical help. Another rare possibility is mosaism. It means that part of your body could produce a biological substance and the other part could not. But for 3 conceptions, it's extremely unlikely. Michael caught his breath. He felt sick. The room suddenly seemed too bright, the walls too white. Highly unlikely, he repeated, almost in a whisper. He clutched at this last chance, no matter how small it was. So it's not absolutely impossible. Maybe I'm one of those rare cases. The doctor's eyes showed genuine pity. I want to be careful with this. Scientifically, you are almost certainly infertile. But I understand why you cling to hope. We can do further testing, karyotyping, more in-depth genetic testing to see if there is a possibility of mosaism. If that helps you gain clarity. He fell silent. Clarity? Is this even possible? Michael felt a tear forming in the corner of his eye and blinked it away. He wouldn't cry. Not here. But his thoughts were already racing forward to a terrifying conclusion. If everything the doctor said was true, then Ethan, Emily, and Jacob were not biologically his children. The thought was so big and devastating that he couldn't take it all in at once. It was like looking directly into the sun. His entire life, his identity, his family, had been built on the belief that he was their father, that he and Sarah had created life together 3 times. If this is a lie, if all this is a lie, what's left then? He stood up abruptly, feeling like he might vomit. Dr. Lee stood up too, looking worried. Michael, I know this is hard. Sit down. Michael leaned on the couch to stay on his feet, but shook his head. I need some time. He could barely get the words out. His chest was tight, his breathing was ragged. He tried to slow it down. Inhale for 4, exhale for 4. He vaguely remembered this from some article on stress management. Take your time, Dr. Lee said softly. He stayed where he was, giving Michael space. Several long moments passed as Michael tried to breathe. He clenched his fists, pressing them against the edge of the exam table, paper crumpling and rustling under his fingers. His mind was a hurricane, a torrent of images and questions and fears. There had to be a mistake. There just had to be. Or maybe the children. Were they mixed up at birth? All 3 of them. It was a desperate, irrational attempt to cling to something, and he knew it. This can't be. This is some kind of nightmare. Finally, he heard Dr. Lee's voice, as if from afar. I'm so sorry, Michael. I wish I could give you different answers. The doctor actually sounded like he was in pain. Michael ran his hand over his face. His palm was damp with sweat. He realized that despite what he felt like, he hadn't actually puked, he had somehow held it in. He needed to go. He needed to be anywhere but under those bright fluorescent lights while his world crumbled. I have to go, he whispered, reaching for the door. I understand, Dr. Lee said. Please, Michael, you shouldn't be alone right now. Should I call someone for you? Your wife? A friend? Michael winced at the mention of Sarah. No, he answered quickly. No, I need to think. The thought of talking to Sarah now seemed impossible. How could he even begin such a conversation? Fear suddenly shot through him, fear of looking her in the eye, fear of hearing the answer if he asked the question. Okay, Dr. Lee nodded. He placed his hand gently on Michael's shoulder, a gesture of sympathy, simple, human. If anything, I'm here. And I can refer you to a psychologist if necessary. This is very difficult news. He paused. I will also expedite those additional tests I mentioned if you wish. In the meantime, please be careful behind the wheel. Are you sure you have no one to talk to right now? Michael swallowed, trying to compose himself. An image of his best friend, Tom, flashed through his mind. Call Tom? Would he even be able to say the words? Maybe, but not now. I can handle it, he lied, his voice shaking. Thank you, doctor. He opened the door. Walking out into the hallway was like stepping into another world, one where everyone else's lives were intact and normal. The nurse at the station looked at him with concern. He must look as bad as he felt. Michael, in a daze, forced himself to walk. In the parking lot, the scorching sun was blinding and seemed indifferent. How can the sun even shine at a time like this? He walked to the car and got in. The silence inside was deafening. Michael gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, as if he was going to drive, but he didn't even put the key in. He just put his head down on the wheel. His whole body shook. A strangled sound, half a sob, half a scream, came from his throat. He slammed his palm on the steering wheel, once, twice. The second time, the horn blared briefly. The sound shook him, and he sucked in a sharp breath, the sob knocking his breath out of him. Tears filled his eyes. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really cried. Now it was as if a dam had burst, and despair and confusion poured out. In just half an hour, his life turned upside down. Everything I believed in could turn out to be a lie. The thought pierced him, cold and sharp. He felt a deep grief wash over him, as if someone had died the life he had thought was his. His identity as a father, the thing he had built his entire adult life on, now seemed on the brink of collapse. And underneath the grief, hot and uncontrollable, anger was beginning to boil. It was not directed at anyone in particular yet, just at the situation itself, at fate. But he knew exactly who it would be directed at when the fog cleared. There was only one adult in the world who could know the truth about how it all began. Sarah. Michael lifted his head, wiping his wet cheeks with the back of his hand. He took several deep breaths, trying to compose himself, at least enough to get behind the wheel. He didn't know where to go. Home. The thought of walking into the house, seeing Sarah and the kids right now in this state. No, not yet. He reached for the phone, his fingers shaking. He dialed the only person he could talk to right now. He needed someone to keep him grounded in reality. Mike. Tom's familiar voice rang out after a couple of beeps. Hey, buddy, how are you? Is everything okay? Are you still at work? Hearing his best friend's voice, Michael almost burst into tears again. He tried to answer, but only a hoarse moan came out. He cleared his throat. Tom, the voice trembled. Tom instantly sensed an alarm. Damn, Mike, what happened? Are you hurt? Where are you? Michael swallowed hard, trying to control the storm of emotions for at least a moment to formulate a thought. I'm at Dr. Lee's clinic. He told me something like that. My voice broke. Don't go away from there, Tom said quickly. I'm leaving. Do you hear me? Don't drive. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Michael nodded, although Tom didn't see it. Okay, he whispered. He ended the call, and the phone slipped from his hand, falling into his lap. The tears stopped, leaving only emptiness, exhaustion. In the silence of the car, Michael looked out the windshield. Outside, the world was the same cars, people, the sun. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago. But for him, everything has changed. Everything. Tom arrived less than 10 minutes later, his tires squealing softly as he pulled up next to Michael's car. By then, Michael had recovered somewhat enough to wipe his face and sit up straight, but the shock still clung to him like a damp fog. Tom barely had time to turn off the engine when he jumped out of the car and walked quickly towards his friend. He abruptly opened the passenger door. "Move over," he commanded. Michael moved automatically to the other side, taking the passenger seat of his own car. Tom got behind the wheel and slammed the door. For a few seconds, he just looked at him, his friend's face filled with worry. "Oh my God, Mike," Tom muttered. "You look like you've been hit by a truck." Michael let out a low chuckle. "It feels something like this." "What happened?" Tom spoke softly, but insistently. "You said the doctor told you something. Are you sick?" Michael opened his mouth, but the words stuck in his throat. Where to begin? He shook his head. "No, not sick." Tom put his hand on his shoulder, firm and reassuring. He had been Michael's best friend since college. They had been through tough breakups, the death of parents, career woes together. But nothing like this had ever happened before. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out," he said quietly. "Just tell me." Michael stared at the dashboard. The doctor's words echoed in his head again, and his heart began to beat faster again. He said that I was sterile," he managed to squeeze out, barely audible. Tom didn't react right away. The words seemed to require translation. "Sterile?" he asked. "But you have children. 3 of them." Tom frowned, as confused as Michael. He meant this was something new, something that happened recently. Michael took a sharp breath. "He meant that it had always been like this, that I was born with it, some kind of genetic disorder. He said that that I couldn't." He couldn't finish. Saying it out loud would confirm it, make it real, and he still desperately wanted it to be a mistake. Tom's hand dropped. "What? That doesn't make sense. There's some kind of mistake. You have children. I was at the hospital when Emily was born, remember? I brought that stupid pink stuffed animal." He started rambling, confused. "How can he say you've always been infertile?" "I don't know," Michael groaned, pressing his palms to his eyes. "But the tests, they did them twice. 0 fertility, and some genetic markers. He was sure, Tom. He said there was almost a 100% chance I couldn't be the father." The voice broke on the last words. Tom leaned back in his seat, his mouth open in amazement. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the distant hum of passing cars and the soft tapping of Michael's cooling engine. Finally, Tom spoke, and his voice changed, became slower, more careful. "Mike, if this is true, then—" He didn't finish the sentence, and there was no need to. Michael dropped his hands. His eyes were dry, the tears seemed to have dried up, but there was an unceasing pain burning in them. "Then my children are not my children," he said bitterly. The words hung in the air, harsh and cruel. Saying them to himself was like a punch in the gut. He immediately regretted saying them out loud, as if he had betrayed his children. "That is, not biologically," he corrected himself quickly, with pain in his voice. "But they are still mine. I raised them. He faltered, unable to continue. Tom looked at him with sympathy. "Of course they're yours. Biology isn't everything." He paused. "But, Sarah." At the mention of her name, Michael's jaw tightened. A flash of anger cut through his grief. "I didn't talk to her. She doesn't know that I went to get the results today." Tom ran his hand over his face, clearly trying to comprehend what was happening. "Is there any chance that this is a mistake? Well, maybe it's a rare condition, or maybe you have a mild form of something. The doctor said it was almost certain. He mentioned something about a rare mosaic, but—" Michael shook his head. His voice went flat. "It's like hoping for lightning to strike. It's unrealistic to count on it." Tom exhaled loudly and stared out the windshield. "So, what are you going to do?" Michael didn't answer right away. His soul was torn by a hurricane of emotions, but now, sitting next to Tom, another aspect of him began to awaken, one that demanded answers. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I can't just go home and pretend everything's okay, but I can't blame Sarah without." He was choosing his words. "Without evidence." Tom nodded slowly. "I understand. You want to be absolutely sure, because as soon as you open that door—" "There is no turning back," Michael finished. He felt a weight tightening inside him. He hated the fact that this conversation was even taking place. Somewhere deep inside, there was still a glimmer of hope that this was all a mistake. But with each passing minute, that hope was fading. Maybe we can approach this logically, Tom suggested, sounding as if he was trying to convince himself as much as Michael. He was an engineer by trade, and when life got too complicated, he turned to logic. Let's list the possibilities. 1. The tests were wrong, and you really are the biological father. 2. You're infertile, the doctors said, and the kids aren't biologically yours. 3. There's some kind of mix-up, like if with a donor or adoption, but you'd know about that. We never did for anything, Michael said. There was never a need. We conceived Ethan a year after we got married. We didn't even try hard, it just happened. Or so I thought. His voice turned bitter. He remembered how happy Sarah had been when she told him she was pregnant with her first child. How they had danced in the kitchen, laughing with pure joy. Now the memory seemed ruined, like a photograph with ink spilled on it. Tom hesitated. Then the only explanation is, "It's that Sarah cheated on me," Michael said bluntly. The words were like poison on his tongue. Anger flared up inside him, first a spark, then a flame. And not just once, Tom, 3 times. Or maybe it was one long affair. Who the hell knows? The idea that Sarah, his Sarah, could be unfaithful was something out of a nightmare. They had their ups and downs like everyone else, but he had always trusted her. Or so he thought. Tom looked at him with obvious pain and still asked the question he apparently didn't want to ask. Have you ever had any suspicions? Anything? Strange? No, Michael answered immediately. Never. She was always a good wife, a great mother. Yes, they argued, like everyone else, but nothing like that. He tried to think of something, a red flag, an odd moment. There had been a time a few years ago when she had seemed a little distant, but they had chalked it up to stress from work. Or that time after Jacob was born when she had seemed guilty, he had wondered if it was because she had quit her job, because she was unsure about staying home. Or maybe those were signs. Michael was shocked. I never suspected her, Tom. He exhaled noisily, leaning back. Sorry, buddy. I really am. He ran his hand through his hair. Look, before you accuse her of anything, you're right. We need evidence. Sometimes miracles happen in medicine. Maybe you really were lucky. Well, almost impossible, but who knows? Science can't do anything, right? Michael gave him a blank look. If it were just one child, maybe I'd still cling to it. But 3? Do you think I won the genetic lottery 3 times? He shook his head. No, I have to accept that it probably means that. But I need proof, something I can see for myself, not just lab numbers on paper. A paternity test, Tom nodded. Yes. Michael exhaled slowly, as if gathering his strength. Yes, I need to do this. Okay, it's not hard. You can buy one of those kits or go to a lab. Tom took out his phone. There's a DNA testing lab downtown. Looks like they do paternity tests. If we go now, maybe we can do it urgently. More expensive, of course, but... He shrugged. Money didn't matter now. Michael frowned. And I need... Well, like, the child's permission. How does that work? They're minors. If you're their legal father, you can give consent on their behalf, Tom said, reading something on his phone. Yeah, it's written here. All they need is a sample from you and the baby. A swab from the inside of your cheek or saliva, something like that. Michael shuddered at the thought of secretly taking a sample from his own child. It seemed like a betrayal of trust. But then he reminded himself that something much bigger had already betrayed his trust. He swallowed. I can't just take them to the lab without an explanation. No, no. Tom waved his phone. There are some that you can make at home, or even sold in a drugstore. You take samples yourself and send them to a lab by number. The results are sent by email. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. Was he really going to do this? Secretly collect his children's DNA to find out if they were his? It seemed absurd. But what choice did he have? Let's take the set, he said quietly. Okay. Tom put the car into gear. "The drugstore is a few blocks from here. I'll swing by, you wait here." He kept his word. A few minutes later, they were already at Walgreens. Michael did not risk going out. He felt unsteady, and he was afraid that he would meet someone he knew. While Tom was inside, Michael took out his phone and saw a missed message from Sarah. "How is your day going? Everything okay? Sent half an hour ago." He stared at the screen, his finger hovering over the keyboard. What could he say? "I found out I can't have kids. How do you think my day goes?" He locked the screen without answering. He wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Not in texts, not in person. Not until he had more than a sneaking suspicion. Tom returned with a small box in a plastic bag. He placed it carefully on Michael's lap. On the box, in large letters, was written, "DNA Paternity Test Kit." Michael felt his face heat up with shame as soon as he saw the inscription. He quickly covered the box with a bag. "I got the one I can make myself and mail," Tom said, starting to move. "They promise quick turnaround, especially if you pay extra for rush processing, maybe a day or two after receiving it." He glanced at his friend. "We only need a sample from one child. I think one will do, right?" Michael clenched his jaw. "If one turns out to be not mine, then—" He didn't finish. He just nodded. That would be enough. If one child wasn't his, then most likely the rest weren't his. If he really had always been sterile. They drove back toward Michael's house, discussing details in hushed tones as if they were planning a covert operation. Michael would collect the sample that evening, and Tom would help with the shipment, using a false name to maintain confidentiality. They decided to provide Tom's address or email address for the results to ensure Sarah wouldn't accidentally intercept anything. As they turned onto Michael's street, reality hit hard. Through the window, he could see his house on the corner, a beautiful two-story cottage on a friendly suburban cul-de-sac. The lawn was neatly trimmed, something he had mowed himself on weekends, and the American flag on the porch fluttered in the breeze. The kids' two bikes were in the driveway, abandoned after school as usual. It all looked so peaceful, so idyllic. The scene of family life that had once been a comfort. Now it seemed like the set for a play he would enter, no longer knowing his role. "Maybe we can approach this logically," Tom suggested, sounding as if he was trying to convince himself as much as Michael. He was an engineer by trade, and when life got too complicated, he turned to logic. "Let's list the possibilities. 1. The tests were wrong, and you really are the biological father. 2. You're infertile, the doctors said, and the kids aren't biologically yours. 3. There's some kind of mix-up, like if with a donor or adoption, but you'd know about that." "We never did for anything," Michael said. "There was never a need. We conceived Ethan a year after we got married. We didn't even try hard, it just happened. Or so I thought." His voice turned bitter. He remembered how happy Sarah had been when she told him she was pregnant with her first child. How they had danced in the kitchen, laughing with pure joy. Now the memory seemed ruined, like a photograph with ink spilled on it. Tom hesitated. "Then the only explanation is, it's that Sarah cheated on me," Michael said bluntly. The words were like poison on his tongue. Anger flared up in him, first a spark, then a flame. "And not just once, Tom. 3 times. Or maybe it was one long affair. Who the hell knows?" The idea that Sarah, his Sarah, could be unfaithful was something out of a nightmare. They had their ups and downs, like everyone else, but he had always trusted her. Or so he thought. Tom looked at him with obvious pain and still asked the question he apparently didn't want to ask. "Have you ever had any suspicions? Anything strange?" "No," Michael answered immediately. "Never. She was always a good wife, a great mother. Yes, they argued, like everyone else, but nothing like that." He tried to think of something, a red flag, an odd moment. There had been a time a few years ago when she'd seemed a little distant, but they'd chalked it up to stress from work. Or that time after Jacob was born when she'd seemed guilty, he'd wondered then about leaving her job, about doubts about staying home. Or maybe those were signs. Michael was shocked. "I never suspected her, Tom." He exhaled noisily, leaning back. Sorry, buddy. I really am. He ran his hand through his hair. Look, before you accuse her of anything, you're right. We need evidence. Sometimes miracles happen in medicine. Maybe you really were lucky. Well, almost impossible, but who knows? Science can't do anything, right? Michael gave him a blank look. If it were just one child, maybe I'd still cling to it. But three? Do you think I won the genetic lottery 3 times? He shook his head. No, I have to accept that it probably means that. But I need proof, something I can see for myself, not just lab numbers on paper. A paternity test, Tom nodded. Yes. Michael exhaled slowly, as if gathering his strength. Yes, I need to do this. Okay? It's not hard. You can buy one of those kits or go to a lab. Tom took out his phone. There's a DNA testing lab downtown. Looks like they do paternity tests. If we go now, maybe we can do it urgently. More expensive, of course, but... He shrugged. Money didn't matter now. Michael frowned. And I need... Well, like, the child's permission. How does that work? They're minors. If you're their legal father, you can give consent on their behalf, Tom said, reading something on his phone. Yeah, it's written here. All they need is a sample from you and the baby. A swab from the inside of your cheek or saliva, something like that. Michael shuddered at the thought of secretly taking a sample from his own child. It seemed like a betrayal of trust. But then he reminded himself that something much bigger had already betrayed his trust. He swallowed. I can't just take them to the lab without an explanation. No, no. Tom waved his phone. There are some that you can make at home, or even sold in a drugstore. You take samples yourself and send them to a lab by number. The results are sent by email. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. Was he really going to do this? Secretly collect his children's DNA to find out if they were his? It seemed absurd. But what choice did he have? Let's take the set, he said quietly. Okay? Tom put the car into gear. The drugstore is a few blocks from here. I'll swing by, you wait here. He kept his word. A few minutes later, they were already at Walgreens. Michael did not risk going out. He felt unsteady, and he was afraid that he would meet someone he knew. While Tom was inside, Michael took out his phone and saw a missed message from Sarah. How is your day going? Everything okay? Sent half an hour ago. He stared at the screen, his finger hovering over the keyboard. What could he say? I found out I can't have kids. How do you think my day goes? He locked the screen without answering. He wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Not in texts, not in person. Not until he had more than a sneaking suspicion. Tom returned with a small box in a plastic bag. He placed it carefully on Michael's lap. On the box, in large letters, was written, DNA Paternity Test Kit. Michael felt his face heat up with shame as soon as he saw the inscription. He quickly covered the box with a bag. I got the one I can make myself and mail, Tom said, starting to move. They promise quick turnaround, especially if you pay extra for rush processing. Maybe a day or two after receiving it. He glanced at his friend. We only need a sample from one child. I think one will do, right? Michael clenched his jaw. If one turns out to be not mine, then he didn't finish. He just nodded. That would be enough. If one child wasn't his, then most likely the rest weren't his. If he really had always been sterile. They drove back toward Michael's house, discussing details in hushed tones, as if they were planning a covert operation. Michael would collect the sample that evening, and Tom would help with the shipment, using a false name to maintain confidentiality. They decided to provide Tom's address or email address for the results to ensure Sarah wouldn't accidentally intercept anything. As they turned onto Michael's street, reality hit hard. Through the window, he could see his house on the corner, a beautiful 2-story cottage on a friendly suburban cul-de-sac. The lawn was neatly trimmed, something he had mowed himself on weekends, and the American flag on the porch fluttered in the breeze. The kids' 2 bikes were in the driveway, abandoned after school as usual. It all looked so peaceful, so idyllic. the scene of family life that had once been a comfort. Now it seemed like the set for a play he would enter, no longer knowing his role. "Can you handle it?" Tom asked quietly, slowing down a few houses away from the one he needed to go so as not to attract attention. Michael took a deep breath. "We'll have to. For now." He met Tom's gaze. "Thank you. For everything." Tom shook his head. "Don't thank me. I'm here if you need anything. Do you want me to come with you? I can pretend I just came to chat." Michael thought about it, but gently refused. "Not today. If I see you, I might lose my temper. And I can't. I have to stay in front of them." He nodded toward the house, and Tom immediately realized he was talking about the children. "Got it. Call me later, or any time, okay? I'll leave the phone on speaker." "I'll call," Michael said. He took a deep breath, opened the car door, and stepped out, clutching the box of dough under his arm. With one last grateful glance at his friend, he braced himself and headed up the path to the front door. The door swung open before he could reach for his keys. Emily stood there, her long brown hair, the same shade as Sarah's, escaping from her ponytail. She was still wearing her soccer uniform from practice. "Dad," she beamed, oblivious to his inner turmoil. "Mom said you could come early. Did you get my message? I scored a goal today." She bounced with excitement. Michael forced a smile, hoping it looked genuine. "This is amazing, Em." He opened his arms, and she rushed towards him. He held her, maybe a little longer than usual, his eyes closed. "My daughter," he thought fervently. "Biological or not, it doesn't matter. This feeling is real now." "Are you okay?" Emily asked, burying her face in his chest, feeling something in his embrace. Michael released her gently. "Yeah, sorry, baby. Just good to see you." His voice was hoarse, and he cleared his throat. "Where's everyone else?" "Mom's in the kitchen. Ethan's upstairs, doing homework, I think. Jacob's at Tyler's, but he should be back soon. We ordered pizza, it's Friday." Emily glanced at the bag under his arm. "What's that?" Michael's heart sank. He almost forgot about the test. "Oh, this? Just some stuff from the drugstore," he said lightly, hoping she wouldn't ask. "Vitamins." It was a pathetic lie, but Emily didn't seem interested. "Cool. I'm starving. I hope Mom got the pepperoni one." Switching gears in an instant, she was already heading to the kitchen, having relayed the story of her goal. Michael walked into the house and closed the door behind him. The familiar warmth and smell of home enveloped him, the scent of Sarah's perfume mixed with the garlic from the kitchen and the ever-present background of laundry detergent and children's sneakers by the entryway. Coming home was usually the best part of the day. Now he felt like a stranger in his own life. He took the test out of the package and quickly hid it between his jacket and briefcase on the bench by the entrance, out of sight. Then he headed to the kitchen. Sarah stood at the counter, chopping vegetables. The pizza boxes were already on the table, one open. Apparently Emily had already tried it. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Hello, you're back. Is everything okay?" Her eyes searched his face. She had a gift for reading his mood. Michael just looked at her for a moment. She was still beautiful, in a simple blue blouse and jeans, her dark gold hair pulled back into a messy bun. The woman he had loved for so many years, the mother of his children. What secrets are hidden behind this warm, familiar look? He felt a tangle of conflicting emotions: love, anger, betrayal. He suppressed them. "Yeah," he lied, forcing a smile that looked natural. "Everything's fine at work. Left early. I wasn't feeling well." Sarah wiped her hands and came closer, placing her palm to her forehead in concern. No fever. Just tired?" Michael shrugged. "I must have had something bad for lunch." He didn't like lying to her. Even such small things felt wrong, but the alternative was worse. "Honey, it's funny, but the doctor said that I'm infertile for life. Do you have anything to tell me?" "Why didn't you call? I would have picked you up," she gently reproached. He gently moved her hand away from her face and held it in his. "Everything is fine. Tom gave me a ride. He was nearby." "What a boy," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "Well, the pizza's on the table. Would you like to eat, or should I heat up some soup? Pizza will do, he replied. Although the smell was nauseating, he had to look normal. Sarah looked at him again. Are you sure everything is okay? You look so. He turned away, ostensibly to get the plates. It's okay, he said confidently. Let's not ruin Friday night, okay? Movie after dinner? It was their tradition. Family movie nights on Fridays. The kids argued between Marvel and the latest animated film. Now, this normality seemed both cruel and comforting. Sarah smiled, as if reassured by his enthusiasm. Great. Call Ethan, and I'll text Mrs. Miller to have Jacob come back. Michael walked out of the kitchen and stopped at the stairs. He needed one more moment to collect himself. So far, everything is going according to plan, he thought ironically. He acted as if everything was fine. But every time he looked at Sarah, the facade began to crack at the seams. He took a breath and shouted up, Ethan, pizza is ready. A muffled voice came from behind the door. They are coming. Michael returned to the dining room, setting out plates and drinks with methodical precision. Emily was talking cheerfully about the game, and Sarah was nodding along, but everything seemed muffled to him, as if he were underwater. He glanced furtively at Sarah. She seemed calm. Guilty? No. Normal. Loving. She laughed at Emily's words, the same easy laugh he knew by heart. Ethan walked into the room, a tall, gangly teenager, not yet accustomed to his body. Hi, Dad, he said with an awkward smile that Michael recognized as his own. He ruffled his son's hair as he walked past to get pizza. How is school? Boring, Ethan shrugged, but I got an A on my history project. He tried to appear unconcerned, but the pride in his eyes gave him away. This time Michael smiled genuinely. Well done. Great job. They had worked on this project for a long time. Remembering that night, his heart sank. These little moments, father and son. Can that ever go away? No. No matter what the outcome, Ethan is still my son. That can't be taken away. At that moment, Jacob burst into the house, his cheeks pink from the game, superhero sneakers on his feet. I can SIIV pizza, he shouted, hugging his father around the waist. Hi, Dad. Michael scooped his 8-year-old son into a bear hug. His eyes watered, but he blinked quickly so no one would notice. Here is my champion, he said with warmth in his voice. Jacob laughed, and Michael put him down on the floor, and he immediately grabbed a piece of pizza. They sat down to dinner, the kids chatting, arguing about which movie to choose, and arguing again about pineapple on pizza, their eternal family joke. Jacob loved it, but Ethan thought it was awful. Michael pitched in where needed, even eating a piece slowly. From the outside, they were the perfect family. But inside, everything was screaming. Under the table, his leg was twitching with tension. He forced himself to smile, to look into the eyes, to be normal. But in his head, there was only one thing, the test hidden in the hallway. After dinner, the kids went into the living room to prepare a movie. Sarah began clearing the table. Michael got up to help. As he picked up Ethan's glass, he had an epiphany. Here it is. There was a clear lip mark on the rim of the glass. Saliva. DNA. His heart was pounding. If he could transfer the sample to the kit's container, that might be enough. I'll clean it up myself. Go choose a movie, he said to Sarah, perhaps too hastily, snatching the glass from her. She raised an eyebrow. Well, I won't argue, she laughed, taking his outburst as an attempt to escape from washing the dishes. She kissed him on the cheek. Thank you. Michael smiled tensely. My pleasure. When she left, he grabbed some paper napkins and carefully wrapped them around his glass, pretending to wipe the table. His hands were shaking. Then he poured the drinks from the other glasses into the sink, making a noise like hiding Ethan's glass of napkins in a plastic drugstore bag tucked next to his jacket. Adrenaline rush, yes. There is a sample. This should be enough. Even if the method is not perfect, the lab will be able to extract cells from saliva. Sarah's voice came from the living room. Mike, we're starting. Are you coming? Yes, just a second, he shouted. He quickly finished the dishes, dried his hands, grabbed his jacket with the test and sample inside, and went into the living room. The sight he saw tightened his chest. The lights were dim. The children were on the couch and the floor, wrapped in blankets. Sarah patted the spot next to her. "Dad, we already started without you," Jacob teased, even though the movie wasn't on yet. Michael sat down next to Sarah, and she nestled under his arm. The Pixar intro came on the screen. Jacob immediately climbed into his lap, settling in with complete confidence. Emily was on his other side, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Ethan was on the floor, next to him, trying to be grown up. It was one of those cozy family moments that Michael lived for. But now, with his heart pounding in anxiety, he held them all close, hiding the fear that could destroy everything. He kissed the top of Jacob's head and tried to focus on the movie. For the next hour and a half, he put on a facade. He laughed when everyone else laughed. He smiled at the children. He held Sarah, who stroked his hand gently with her thumb. It almost seemed normal. Almost. If it weren't for the weight on his heart, he might have believed that this evening was no different from any other. The moment the credits rolled on the screen and the children began to yawn and stretch was a return to reality with cold clarity. "Time for bed, buddy," Michael muttered to a half-asleep Jacob. He picked the boy up and carried him upstairs, and Sarah followed after sending the older children off to get ready for bed. Michael acted on autopilot, repeating his usual actions. He helped Jacob change into his pajamas, reminded him to brush his teeth, to which Jacob sleepily objected that he had already done this at his friend's, but Michael insisted, then covered him with a blanket. "Daddy's here," Jacob muttered, already falling asleep, in that serene confidence that children have when their parents are nearby. "I'm here," Michael whispered, sitting down on the edge of the small bed. In the soft light of the nightlight, he looked at his son's face, peaceful and innocent, and the pain pierced him with new force. No matter what science said, he was this boy's father. He had cut those tiny nails, read hundreds of bedtime stories, and comforted him after scraping knees. He had been there from the very first moment he had been the one to cut the umbilical cord, his hands shaking with happiness. To hell with biology. This connection was real, and all he could do was cling to it, no matter what happened. He kissed Jacob on the forehead and left quietly when Jacob was finally asleep. Across the hall, he noticed that Ethan's door was ajar, light streaming in. "Good night, Dad," Ethan called casually from inside. "Good night, buddy. Just don't stay up too late." "I'll just finish the level," he replied, referring to the video game. Michael didn't insist, he simply didn't have the strength for it. In Emily's room, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the bed, quietly talking to her daughter, most likely their usual evening ritual. Michael heard Emily's voice and Sarah's soft laughter. He decided not to disturb this mother-daughter moment and went downstairs. He needed to hide the test kit with the sample and just get some air. In the hallway, he quietly took the hidden package from his jacket pocket. The house was quiet, except for the muffled voices upstairs. Michael knew Sarah would be down soon. He had to hurry. He went into his home office and closed the door. With trembling hands, he opened the box containing the DNA test kit. Inside were cotton swabs, envelopes, and instructions. Ideally, samples were to be taken from both the alleged father and the child. He glanced at it. Yes, 2 samples, one for the alleged father, one for the child. Each was assigned a unique ID, which could then be used to check the results online. He hadn't tested himself yet. That was easy. He took out a sterile swab and carefully ran it along the inside of his cheek, counting the seconds as instructed. Then he sealed it in an envelope labeled "Parent." Then he carefully picked up Ethan's glass. There was still some soda left at the bottom. Using a second swab, he touched the rim of the glass, collecting saliva. To increase his chances, he even swirled the swab in the rest of the drink, hoping that there were still epithelial cells there. It wasn't exactly according to the instructions, but it was something. He sealed the sample in an envelope labeled "Child." He filled out the form using an anonymous ID, opted to receive the results via email, and paid for the extra rush processing service, as Tom had suggested. The form asked for a credit card number. He hesitated. Using his own card would leave a trace, but there was no other way. To hell with it, he entered the details. If Sarah ever saw the payment, she'd deal with it later. Right now, it was one problem at a time. Finally, he placed the sealed envelopes and the form in the prepared mailing package. Everything was ready. He would mail it on Saturday morning. With express delivery, the lab would receive the samples on Monday. When he finished, he realized his palms were cold and clammy. This secret procedure was something he never thought he would do. It seemed he had set in motion a chain of events that could not be stopped. A soft knock on the office door made him jump. He quickly hid the package of dough in the desk drawer and closed it. "Why, yes," he muttered, hoping his voice didn't betray guilt. Sarah peered through the door, smiling softly. "All the children are there and almost asleep. What are you doing here?" "Oh," Michael said, searching frantically for an excuse. "Just sorting the mail. You know, bills and stuff." It was a weak explanation, but she had no reason to doubt it. He did do a lot of paperwork here. She entered the room and closed the door behind her. In the soft light of the lamp, she walked up to him and put her arms around his waist. "Are you sure you're okay?" she whispered, looking into his eyes. There was concern and tenderness in her gaze. She stroked his back gently. "You're kind of quiet today." Michael's heart began to pound. Standing so close, wrapped in her familiar warmth, he felt a storm of contradictions. He loved this woman with all his heart that was undeniable, and the thought that she could betray him so cruelly constricted his throat. Part of him wanted to spill it all right now. How could you? But the other part was afraid to hear the answer. He gathered his strength and told a half-truth. "Just tired," he said quietly. "Maybe I caught something. Didn't want to worry you." She raised her hand and gently ran her thumb across his cheek. "You know you can tell me everything, right?" The irony almost made him wince. "I know," he whispered. He leaned down and kissed her, gently, reservedly, but with all his pain and confusion in that kiss. Sarah responded, then laid her head on his chest. "Let's go to bed," she said. "You need rest." He nodded. He really needed the rest, though he doubted he would be able to sleep. They turned off the light and walked upstairs together, Sarah holding his hand. Later, with Sarah asleep next to him, Michael lay with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in his head over and over. The doctor's words, the conversation with Tom, the secret test ready to be sent. A routine family dinner that might have been built on a lie. He listened to Sarah's even breathing in the darkness and wondered what secrets might be hidden behind it. In a few days, he would receive the truth. He only prayed that he would have the strength to face it. The next 2 days passed in excruciating uncertainty for Michael. Every minute with Sarah was like walking a tightrope over an abyss, and every glance at the children was a reminder that he could lose everything or perhaps never really had it all. On Saturday morning, Michael woke up from a restless sleep with a sharp start. For the first few seconds, he tried to figure out whether the events of the previous day were real or a nightmare, but the heaviness in his chest left no doubt. Next to him, Sarah was still sleeping, her hand on his chest. He carefully slipped out from under her, desperate for air. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Children usually slept longer on weekends. Michael made coffee, needing some routine to keep from going crazy. As he poured himself a cup, he saw the soft postal envelope containing the test, the same one he had left on top of the pile of letters the day before. A sharp pang of anxiety he had to mail it. The sooner he did it, the faster the hours would pass until he got a response. Still in his pajamas, he left the house and headed for the mailbox on the corner. The morning air was cool, the lawns were covered in dew, a typical peaceful suburban scene. But he felt out of place in it all. Taking a deep breath, he dropped the envelope into the slot and heard a dull thud. He was gone. He stood there for a moment, hands on hips, looking out at the peaceful street. He wondered if any of his neighbors could see him, in flannel pants and a t-shirt, looking confused. If only they knew. When he returned home, he found Sarah in the kitchen, yawning and pouring herself some coffee, her robe tightly wrapped around her. "You're early today," she said with slight surprise. "I couldn't sleep," Michael replied, and that, at least, wasn't a lie. She looked at him over her mug. "Are you feeling better?" "A little," he said. "The coffee helps." "Okay." She came closer and placed her palm on his forehead again, checking for a fever, motherly and caring. Everything seems fine. It was probably just a one-day virus." "Perhaps," he said, and turned away, occupied with the pitcher at the sink, though it did not need rinsing. He avoided looking her in the eyes for too long, afraid that she would see the storm that was raging inside him. "What are your plans for today?" she asked casually, leaning her elbows on the kitchen counter. "We could take the kids to the park, or, if you're up to it, to a movie." Michael's instinct told him to avoid public places. He felt as fragile as glass, but he was also desperate for distraction. "A park sounds nice," he managed to say. He pictured their usual park, kids kicking a ball or throwing a frisbee, him and Sarah sitting on a bench. It was a happy memory. Now he wasn't sure if it would comfort him or break him completely. Sarah looked pleased. She came up behind him, put her arms around his waist, and pressed her forehead between his shoulder blades. "I'm glad you're better," she whispered. Michael froze in her arms for a moment, then forced himself to relax. Her warmth was so familiar, so usually welcome. He placed his hands on top of hers. "Thank you," he said, but his voice sounded strained. She gave it a light squeeze, then let go and headed towards the stove. "Maybe we should make some pancakes for the kids. It's Saturday after all." He nodded, watching her pull ingredients from the pantry. She hummed softly to herself, a habit she did when she was in a good mood. And why wouldn't she be in a good mood? As far as she was concerned, everything was fine. Michael felt a flash of irritation. How could she act so calm, so casual, when she was keeping something so huge from him? If she really didn't know he was sterile, or had she been deluding herself, convincing herself that the children were his? Or maybe she just never had to face the truth because it had never come up. The thought twisted his insides. He took a mug of coffee and left the kitchen. He needed to get his thoughts in order. In the living room, he sank down on the sofa. His gaze slid over the picture frames on the mantel. There they were, the beach trip last summer, Michael hugging Sarah and the kids, everyone smiling, a Christmas portrait from 2 years ago, Ethan awkwardly posing in a sweater, Emily laughing, Jacob tugging at her Santa hat, a picture from the hospital with Jacob in Sarah's arms as a newborn, Michael sitting next to him, his eyes proud and tired. Michael stood up and walked over to the fireplace, his eyes drawn to the hospital photo. He picked it up carefully. Jacob was red and wrinkled, just minutes old. Sarah's hair was matted with sweat, but her smile was bright. And Michael. He barely recognized himself in the picture. So sincere were his tears of joy when he touched his son's cheek. One of the happiest moments of his life. Now his gaze was fixed on the baby's face. He hadn't looked for similarities, then the baby was brand new, like all babies. But over the years, everyone had said Jacob had Michael's mouth or Michael's facial expressions. Was it all just in my head? He thought. People see what they expect to see because I am recognized as a father. He remembered Ethan's face when he was little. Strangers often said, "You look just like your dad." Was it so? Or was Michael simply enjoying the words without going into detail? In fact, Ethan had his mother's eyes and dark hair, but his chin, maybe Michael's, maybe not. He just never questioned why he would do it. A memory came to mind. Sarah, pregnant with Ethan, her first pregnancy. How she tiptoed into the bedroom in the morning with a pregnancy test in her hand, tears of happiness in her eyes, whispering, "We did it, we're expecting a baby." Michael picked her up and twirled her around with joy. They told all their friends and family literally a couple of weeks later. Now the memory made her sick. If she already knew then that he couldn't have children, could she have staged all of this? Or did she not know then either? He replaced the frame with trembling hands. His mind was a battleground of conflicting versions. Part of him wanted to believe in a miracle, maybe at least one of the pregnancies really was his. but logic, backed by the doctor's confidence, put everything in its place. Sarah's endless calm, her lack of guilt, her lack of worry if she had cheated, she had hidden it perfectly. Or she had simply thought she could get away with it, he thought grimly. He imagined telling her the truth. What would her face be like? Would it contort with panic, or would she assume she didn't understand and continue lying? His fists clenched. He noticed he was breathing heavily and tried to calm himself when he heard footsteps from above. Emily appeared on the stairs, drawn by the smell of pancakes. "Good morning, Dad," she said cheerfully, still in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess. She put her arms around his waist and looked at him. "Are you okay?" Michael smiled tensely. "Yes, dear. Just thinking." "Okay," she nodded, satisfied with the answer, and rushed into the kitchen. Oh, pancakes." Soon the whole family gathered for breakfast. Michael sat at the table, mechanically munching on pancakes with syrup. The children chatted about the weekend. Ethan wanted to meet a friend to play basketball. Emily had homework and a video call with a friend. Jacob was trying to negotiate a trip to the toy store. "Maybe tomorrow," Sarah laughed at his persistence. "It's family day, remember? We should take advantage of the good weather." "Do we have to go, Mom?" Ethan groaned. "I made a deal with Tyler." "Family day," Sarah repeated, her tone brooking no argument. "Tyler should come to the park, too. We're not here for the whole day." Ethan clearly wanted to argue, but noticed how silent his father was. "Dad, are you sure it's okay to go to the park?" "Well, if you're sick." Michael realized that everyone was looking at him. He was a ghost at the table, barely saying a few words. He cleared his throat. "The park is a great idea," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "I'm fine, don't worry." The last thing he wanted was to ruin their day with his own inner collapse. Sarah squeezed his hand for a moment and smiled. "Great. It will be good for everyone to be together." Her touch was soft and familiar, but Michael had to resist the urge to pull his hand away as anger began to boil inside him again. "How many times has this hand betrayed me?" The inner voice whispered angrily. He bit the inside of his cheek, squeezed her hand in response, and remained silent. After breakfast, the children ran off to their rooms to get dressed. Michael stayed behind to help Sarah in the kitchen. She washed the pans. He silently dried the dishes. The routine of the house contrasted with the storm in his head. "You're a little quiet today, dear," Sarah said carefully. "Is work tiring you out? You know I'm always here." "The work is fine," he snapped. She looked at him with concern. "Are you sure you're okay? If you don't want to go anywhere." "I told you everything's fine," he interrupted sharply, more rudely than he intended. Sarah flinched at his tone. "Okay," she said quietly, turning off the tap. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be pushy." He was immediately struck with a feeling of guilt. "No, it's my fault. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap at you." He exhaled heavily and put the plate down. "I just didn't sleep well. It's not you." She looked at him searchingly, uncertainty in her eyes. "If something was bothering you, you would tell me, right?" He opened his mouth to answer, but the words wouldn't come. He just looked at her, feeling like a fraud. Emotions suddenly welled up in his throat, tears welling up in his throat. He closed his eyes and nodded. "Certainly." Sarah came closer and placed her wet hand on his arm. "Mike, no matter what happens, we'll get through it. You know that, right? We're always together." Her sincerity was unbearable. He turned away under the pretext of putting the plate in the cupboard. Otherwise, he simply would not have been able to restrain himself. "I know," he whispered. "Together. We are a team." The words sounded hollow. If she had been lying all these years, then there had been no together. He was alone in this truth. Soon they were in the car and driving to the park. The late morning sun was caressing Michael's face through the windshield. Sarah was at his side. The children were laughing in the back seat. It all seemed like a scene from someone else's happy life. At the park, the children scattered immediately. Ethan, with a ball, headed for the basketball court, where other teenagers were already playing. Emily and Jacob were chasing each other across the grass. Sarah laid out a blanket under their usual oak tree. Michael helped her, then sat with his arms around his knees, looking at the children in the distance. They've got so much energy, Sarah laughed, leaning back on her palms. We'll be lucky if we can get them back for lunch. Michael nodded absently. His gaze was fixed on Ethan, who was playing with two boys. He recognized Tyler, the friend he had mentioned. The third boy was very tall. At first, Michael thought he was an adult. His heart skipped a beat. Ethan jumped toward the hoop, and Michael stared at him. 16 years old, he was almost as tall as Michael. He moved with the same easy grace that Michael had possessed in school. But all this can be developed, he reminded himself. He had taught Ethan to throw a ball, to play football. Nurture, not nature. And yet, the posture, the tilt of his head, there was something of Michael's father about him. Was it just fantasy, or was the resemblance real? What are you thinking about? Sarah's voice brought him out of his stupor. She lightly nudged him with her shoulder. He smiled tensely. I just look at the kids. I wonder when they manage to grow so much. Yes, she sighed, also looking at the children. Time flies. But we did well, didn't we? 3 wonderful children. Her words were like a knife. We did it, or did someone else give you these children? He felt his jaw tighten. He hoped she didn't notice. Yes, he said barely audibly, they really are wonderful. She smiled and laid her head on his shoulder. The gesture was gentle, feminine, and warm. Michael tensed for a second, then allowed himself to relax. He didn't like the way his body instinctively rejected her touch, but the anger in him didn't subside. On the contrary, the calmer she behaved, the stronger she grew. I love you, Sarah said suddenly, still looking at the children but squeezing his hand. I know, I say it often, but sometimes I feel it so strongly that I just can't keep quiet. Michael felt his throat tighten with pain. He turned to face her. Her face was calm, open, and completely sincere. He could barely breathe under the weight of conflicting emotions. He loved her too, or at least who he thought she was. But if she had really done what he suspected, then she had been lying every time she said those words, hadn't she? Or could she love him despite such betrayal? The same thoughts swirled in his head. He swallowed hard. I love you too, he said. The words were hoarse, but they were true in a way. It wasn't a lie despite everything. He loved her. That was why it hurt so much. He wanted to kiss her, to bury his suspicions and find peace again. Instead, he took her hand gently. His chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. They sat silently next to each other, watching their children play. It could have been a perfect moment, husband and wife enjoying a sunny day, proud of the life they had built. But for Michael, it felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, where the slightest false move could mean a fall. That afternoon, back at home, Michael began doing chores, anything to distract his mind. He mowed the lawn, even though he didn't need to, just to let out his nervous tension. As he pushed the mower, fragments of memories came into his head, each one now looking alarming and threatening. He remembered how, early in their marriage, before Ethan was conceived, they had tried for months to conceive without success. He had taken it in stride, but Sarah had seemed worried. And then, out of the blue, she had announced she was pregnant. He hadn't questioned it. Many couples tried for a long time. It was normal. But what if she had been afraid he wouldn't be able to father a child and had made the decision herself? No, that sounded crazy, or did it? And then Emily's conception. Sarah was working as a freelance consultant after leaving her previous job, and she had to travel a couple of times. One of those trips coincided with that time, 9 months before Emily was born. He went with her on one trip, but not on the other. Could she have met someone then? Michael gritted his teeth, frustrated by how little he remembered with precision. He'd never really kept track of his cycles or conception dates. Why should he? They were husband and wife, making love regularly. Pregnancy, when it came, was a blessing, not the result of any plan. He hated that he even entertained such thoughts about Sarah. It felt like a betrayal in itself to suspect her of such cold-bloodedness. The woman he knew was kind, loving, honest, or did he only think he knew her? Was he that blind? Sunday brought no relief. On the contrary, the tension only increased. The letter from the lab could arrive as early as Monday evening if everything went quickly, as Tom said. Michael kept checking his phone, although he knew it was still early. His nerves were on edge, and it showed. At dinner on Sunday, he barely touched his food. Sarah caught him looking at the children several times, worried. She tried to engage him in small talk, Jacob sharing his impressions of the cartoon, Emily telling him about the song she was learning on the piano, but Michael responded in monosyllables. After the children had gone to bed, Sarah finally spoke softly to him in the bedroom. "Mike, please talk to me," she said, sitting down next to him on the bed while he massaged his temples. "You haven't been yourself all weekend. I'm seriously worried. Is something wrong? If it's work, we'll handle it. If you're not feeling well, we'll go to the doctor. Just please. You're scaring me." He looked at her, torn inside. Part of him wanted to blurt it all out, demanding an explanation right now. The thought flashed through his mind, should he wait for the test results? What if he pressed charges and she convinced him it was all a mistake? Or worse, what if she lied so convincingly that he believed her, and then the test crushed him completely? No, he had to wait. There was only a little time left. He had to wait for irrefutable proof. But now, as she looked at him with love and worry, it was almost unbearable. She had no idea of the storm that was coming to their lives. He realized that she was almost in tears, clearly imagining the worst reasons for his silence. In part, he thought bitterly, she might have deserved a little discomfort if his suspicions were confirmed. But he still couldn't bear to see her suffer. So he lied again, hoping it would take her worries away for at least a day. He hugged her, both to comfort her and to hide his own face. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I know I wasn't myself. I was just stressed. I have a big project at work, and I'm not sleeping well. Everything just came at me. I didn't want to distance myself." She pressed herself closer to him. "Whatever happens, we'll get through it. You can always lean on me. You know that, right?" He almost laughed at the tragedy of those words. Instead, he simply nodded, leaning into her shoulder. "I know. I can handle it, I promise. I just need to get a good night's sleep and wait for this project to be finished." She pulled back to look at his face, and he gave her his most reassuring smile. After a moment, she seemed to believe him. She wiped a tear from under her eye. "Okay, if you say so." She kissed him softly, long, and Michael responded, trying to remember the taste of her lips, her touch, in case this was the last time. They fell asleep entwined, her leg on his thigh, her head on his chest. This closeness had once brought him peace, but now Michael lay awake in the darkness, listening to her breathing and wondering if he even knew the woman he held in his arms. Monday morning began with a gray, drizzly morning. The weather matched Michael's mood, gloomy, nervous. He acted automatically, kissed Sarah when she left for the office, got the children ready for school, handed out backpacks and lunch boxes. He took the day off he knew he wouldn't be able to concentrate on work anyway. By mid-afternoon, he was on edge. He checked his email every 10 minutes and paced the living room. Tom texted a couple of times to see if there was any news, and Michael responded dryly that there was nothing yet. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read the newspaper, he felt his phone vibrate. His heart leapt into his throat as he saw the notification, an email from the lab. He grabbed the phone, his hand suddenly sweaty, and opened the email. It took him a few seconds to realize what was written there. Even though he had expected it, even though everything had been leading up to it, his vision blurred. Under the heading, Probability of Paternity, was a number, 0%. It was like a verdict on a case he didn't even know existed. 0 probability. He wasn't Ethan's father. Not a chance. Michael covered his mouth with his hand, holding back a groan. He closed his eyes, burning tears were coming. "This is true," the voice whispered in his head. "They are not yours, none of them." He didn't know how long he sat there, shaking, torn between anger and despair. But at some point, through the tears and the world that had collapsed, another thought became clear to him. Whatever the reasons, whatever her version of events, Sarah had betrayed him in the most terrible way. Only she could do it. And now, with proof in hand, he was going to hear the truth from her lips. Michael didn't remember getting up from the table or pacing the living room, but he found himself suddenly at the front door, phone still in hand, as Sarah pulled into the driveway at the end of the day. It was getting dark outside, rain was falling, the headlights of the car cutting through the gloom. His heart was pounding in his chest. This was the moment of truth. He knew he had to stay calm, think of a way to start the conversation. But when he heard the key go into the lock, it was as if a fuse had blown inside him. Sarah walked in, shaking raindrops off her umbrella. "Hello," she began with her usual smile, but her expression changed when she met his gaze. Michael stood by the door, tense, his fists clenched at his sides. Only now did he notice that he hadn't turned on any lights. He was standing in semi-darkness. He must have looked strange, scary even. "Mike," she said uncertainly, closing the door. She looked around. "Why aren't the lights on? Where are the kids?" Children, of course. Michael almost forgot in his obsession with the truth. Ethan was at basketball practice. Emily was visiting a friend at school. Jacob was at a playdate with a neighbor. It had all been planned out in advance. On adrenaline, Michael had arranged for them all to be out of the house for a couple of hours. He was supposed to be alone with Sarah. "They're not home," he said dryly. Sarah frowned. "Not home? Monday? Did you arrange this?" "Yes." He took a step forward. "We need to talk." Even in the dim light, he could see her face go pale. "Okay," she said slowly, carefully placing her purse on the table by the wall. "You're scaring me. What happened?" Michael tried to steady his breathing, but images from the last few days were rushing through his head, the doctor's office, the test results, his entire past life. His fingers tightened around the phone. "I received news on Friday," he began, his voice tight and measured. "From Dr. Lee." Sarah stepped closer, worry outweighing her doubts. "From the examination? What's there? Are you okay?" He almost wanted to laugh. She was worried about his health. He got straight to the point. He said, "I was sterile, Sarah, since birth." The words hit her like a slap. Sarah blinked rapidly, clearly not immediately comprehending what was said. "Infertile? What are you?" He said, "I could never have children." Michael's voice shook with suppressed emotion. "Congenital, absolute, irreversible infertility. From birth." He saw her lips part, then close again. Her eyes twitched, an involuntary reaction, and that was enough. She knew what it meant. "Michael," she began, and he caught the tremor in her voice. He continued, bitterness pouring out. "Imagine my surprise," he said through gritted teeth. "I told him, that's impossible. I have 3 children." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Michael, He asked me if they were really mine." Michael continued sharply, his nails digging into his palms. "My own doctor asked me that question. Do you know what that's like?" Sarah stepped back, and he took a step forward, her back almost touching the wall. There were tears in her eyes, glistening in the dim light coming through the window from the veranda. "Please, just listen." "No, I don't want to listen to you anymore. It's my turn to talk." His voice was rising despite himself. "I took a paternity test, Sarah." He picked up the phone and waved it. "I have proof. Scientific. 0%. So don't you dare start lying now. Don't you dare." Sarah's eyes widened at the mention of the test. A tear rolled down her cheek. Did you do the test?" Her voice was quiet, full of emotion. "Hell yeah, Ethan's not mine. None of them are they?" The words came out with a hateful edge, 16 years of pain and betrayal in them. Sarah sank against the wall, covering her face with her hands. God. At another time, seeing her like this might have softened Michael. But now it seems farcical. Was she crying now? Was she heartbroken now? What right did she have? "How could you?" he snapped, his voice breaking. "How could you do this to me, to our family?" She shook her head, still covering her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." Pity? Michael laughed bitterly without a hint of humor. His eyes were watering with anger. "Are you sorry? After you let me live a lie for 16 years? He paced the room again and again, unable to sit still. "It was all a lie, Sarah. All our dreams, our plans. Was it all a lie? You laughed behind my back, watching a fool raise other people's children." Sarah removed her hands from her face, which was written in agony. "No, never. I never thought so." "Then why?" he roared, slamming his palm against the wall. A photo frame rattled next to him. "Why did you do this? Was I not enough for you? Did our marriage mean nothing? Who is he, Sarah? Who is the father of your children?" She winced from the blow to the wall, tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't because you weren't enough. Please believe me." Michael's laughter sounded strangled. "Not about me. You cheated on me time after time, and it wasn't about me. Enlighten me. What was it about then?" Sarah was shaking. She reached out as if to touch him, but he pulled back as if her fingers were knives. Her face was contorted in pain. "I was afraid," she breathed out. "We tried, and nothing worked. So you just decided I was infertile, and the logical solution was to sleep with someone else." His voice was venomous, every word a sting. She sobbed and shook her head. "Remember the first year after the wedding? We tried for months. I went to the doctor, to the gynecologist. She said I was fine, and suggested you get tested. But you—" "What?" he interrupted sharply, trying to remember. Everything was vague. He remembered that she had gone to the doctor a couple of times, but he didn't know why. "You said no," Sarah whispered. "You said we shouldn't interfere, that everything would work out on its own. You just waved it off. But I knew how much you wanted children. We both did." Michael felt dizzy. Indeed, he had rejected everything then, was sure that everything would work out, and did not want to hear about problems. "I didn't know," he muttered weakly. "I didn't know the problem was me. But you knew?" "I suspected," she admitted, feeling guilty. "I'm sorry. Maybe I should have insisted, but you wouldn't listen. I was afraid of hurting you, afraid that you'd refuse treatment altogether. And she took a deep breath. "I wanted a baby so badly, Mike. It was instinctive. And I wanted your baby, I really did. But when the doctor said I was fine, I was so afraid that you'd never agree to the tests and we'd miss our chance." Michael looked at her in complete disbelief. "And you decided to just find someone and get pregnant. Who?" he asked, overcome with jealousy and betrayal. "Was it someone you knew or just a random guy?" She flinched at his words. "It was someone I knew. From work." Michael felt sick. An image flashed in his mind, a faceless colleague sleeping with Sarah. He would have vomited if his mouth hadn't been clenched. "How many times?" he squeezed out. "How many nights were you with him while I sat at home, not knowing anything?" "It wasn't an affair in the usual sense," she said quickly, looking at him pleadingly. "I didn't love him. I never stopped loving you. It was a means to an end." She winced. "The meanest thing I've ever done. I only saw him a few times, and once I got pregnant, I stopped." "A few times," Michael echoed. He wondered who it was, had he ever seen it. Did it know the children were his? Anger was rising again. He knew you were using him to get pregnant." Sarah swallowed hard. "I didn't explain it that way. But he knew I was married and that nothing more would happen between us. I told him I wanted a baby. I guess he thought you knew, maybe. I don't know. We didn't discuss the details." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, tears still streaming. "And no, it wasn't one of your friends. You didn't know him. He left the company soon after. I cut off contact completely." Michael shook his head in disbelief. The woman in front of him was both his wife and a stranger. A tear rolled down his cheek, and he brushed it away furiously. "And Emily? Jacob? Did you need him again, or were there others?" Sarah screamed in pain. "No, no one else. It was the same person. Michael felt the world sway. The same man fathering all three. It was a hidden second life, repeated 3 times. After Ethan was born, Sarah continued, I said to myself, this is it. I have what I wanted, what we wanted. We were so happy, the three of us. You were on cloud 9. She paused, then continued. I thought I could live with this secret that no one would ever know. But then, when Ethan was about 2, you started talking about how great it would be for him to have a brother or sister. Remember? Michael nodded. He remembered. The desire for a second child. They had both decided to try then. I was panicking inside, Sarah admitted, because if we'd tried it ourselves, it wouldn't have worked, and I'd have had to either confess or make up excuses. I should have told you then. I know. Her gaze went blank. But I was scared again. I saw how much you adored Ethan. I convinced myself that if I just did it again, we'd be a happy family, and you'd never know. So you called him again, Michael said dully. She nodded in agony. It was a terrible thing to do. I hate myself for it. But yes, Emily came about from those meetings. Her voice wavered. And years later, with Jacob, you were the one who suggested having a third. We had a false alarm then, remember? You said it might be a sign. And the kids are older now. I thought if I said no, you'd get suspicious. You were so excited about the idea, and I wanted another one too. Our family seemed perfect, and I did it again. Michael exhaled heavily, covering his face with his hands. He couldn't digest what he had heard. His entire beautiful family, all the joy he had felt, turned out to be built on secret deals and triple betrayal. Were you ever going to tell me? He asked quietly through his fingers. Sarah was silent for a long time. I told myself it would be better if you didn't know, she said finally. What good would that do? Just pain. The kids are yours and everything but biology, Mike. You're their father. Always have been. Biology, I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. It matters to me, he cried, throwing his hands down. Oh my God, Sarah, it matters. It may not affect how much I love them, but it matters that you lied, that you cheated, that you robbed me of the ability to choose or even know the truth about my own life. She curled up on the floor, sobbing. I know, and I was wrong. I was so wrong. I lived every day dreading this moment, hating myself for what I had done, and at the same time, terrified of losing you if you found out. It looks like you're losing me anyway, he said bitterly. Either I find out and leave, or I stay in the dark and our whole marriage is a lie. Sarah shook her head firmly. It wasn't a lie to me. Michael, please. I know how it sounds, but every day, every moment spent together as a family, it was real. My love for you is real. Your love for them is real. And their love for you. Nothing can change that. Don't, he warned, his voice hoarse. Don't try to turn this into a we're still a happy family speech. You ruined everything the moment you decided to do that behind my back. I was wrong, she repeated, crawling a few feet toward him on her knees. I was young and desperate and stupid, and then I felt trapped by my own decisions. I never meant to hurt you. Michael's anger hadn't subsided, but looking at her on her knees, pleading, he felt his heart clench. This was a nightmare he couldn't even imagine. He'd loved this woman for nearly 2 decades. To see her like this now was a torn mix of rage and the desire to comfort her tears. It tore him apart. Get up, he muttered, turning away. She looked up, not understanding. Get off the floor. I can't talk to you like this. It felt wrong, like kicking a wounded animal. Sniffling, she struggled to her feet, leaning against the wall. They stood opposite each other in the dim light, Michael with his arms tightly crossed, as if trying to hold himself together, and Sarah, clutching her hands, her face streaked with tears. There was a heavy, tense silence, broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing. Michael closed his eyes, trying to think clearly. There were so many questions, each one hurting like shards of glass in his throat. One in particular stung. Do they know? He asked quietly. Anyhow, do they know that I'm not their biological father? Sarah shook her head, her breath catching. No, of course not. How could they? They are absolutely certain that you are their father, because you are. In everything except. She bit her lip, her voice breaking. I never, not for a second, wanted them to see you as anything other than Dad. Michael let out a breath he hadn't even realized he'd been holding. At least the kids were in the dark. For now, he thought. And then what? If he left, if everything fell apart, what then? He took a few steps away, pressing his hands to his forehead, his temples throbbing with an impending headache. Who is he? He asked again, more quietly. That man, is he still around? Could it come up through him again? Sarah sighed heavily. His name is Daniel. He was a consultant working with my firm at the time. He moved abroad shortly after Jacob was born. We haven't kept in touch for over 8 years. He's never tried to contact me, and I've never tried to contact him. I doubt he knows anything. I'm sure he doesn't even know about Jacob. Michael winced at the mention of the name. Daniel, at least he wasn't a faceless ghost now. But that didn't make it any easier. So he can show up one day, not knowing that he has 3 children, and ruin everything again. No, he didn't know about the second or third, Sarah admitted. I didn't tell him I was doing it again. After the first time, he thought it was a one-off. The other times, it was quick, and I cut it off right away. If he suspected anything about Emily or Jacob, he didn't ask, and I didn't say anything. Michael ran his hands over his face, feeling the fatigue creeping up on him now that the adrenaline was fading. It had all been too much. He had felt like he was either going to explode or pass out several times in the last few minutes. Mike, Sarah said quietly, taking a step forward. He raised his hand mechanically, and she froze 2 steps away from him. Please, she whispered, her voice shaking. Say something. Scream, shout, anything. Just please, don't hate me. His hand trembled in the air. I don't know what I feel, he said honestly. I love you, I hate you. I'm furious, and I'm devastated. His voice broke on the last word, and he quickly turned away, clenching his jaw. He couldn't let himself cry in front of her. Not now. I know I messed up, she cried, but we can get through this. We can, right? The kids, think about the kids. They need you. They need their daddy. Michael smiled bitterly. Their dad. Am I? Legally, yes. Emotionally, yes. Biologically, no. Everything I thought was true in my life turned out to be a lie. He turned to her, his eyes red. You destroyed everything, Sarah. Everything. Our trust, our connection. I don't know how to come back from this. She reached for him again, desperation on her face. This time he didn't back away, and her arms wrapped around him, squeezing tightly. I will do anything to make it right. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are the only man I have ever loved, the only one I need. What I did is unforgivable, but I beg you to try to forgive. For us. For them. Her hands were cold and shaking. Michael looked at her slender fingers, at the wedding ring he had put on her many years ago. He remembered that day in the smallest details, the joy, the hope. He never thought that betrayal could grow out of such love. He slowly freed his hands from her grip. I can't now, he said with difficulty. I can't even look at you. I need to get out of here. Panic flashed in her eyes. Where are you going? Please don't go. We need to talk some more. We need to. I can't. He shook his head. I can't talk anymore today. I can't think. I feel like I can't breathe. He headed for the door, grabbing his jacket from the hanger. Sarah followed him, crying. Michael, please, please don't go. Don't leave us. The children will be here soon. What should I tell them? He paused, putting on his jacket. God, the kids, what would they think if he disappeared? He ran a hand through his hair. Tell them I went to help Uncle Tom with something urgent. I don't know. Anything. I'll talk to them tomorrow. I just can't be here now. Sarah reached out to him again, but stopped, her arms falling limply at her sides. I'm so sorry, she whispered again through her tears. I love you so much. Please come back. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes again as he opened the door, letting in cool, rain-scented air. "I'll come back, for the children," he said dully. "I just need time." He walked out into the night, closing the door behind him, through which he could hear Sarah's heartbreaking sobs. He stood on the porch, the rain drizzling on his face. From inside, he heard a muffled cry, his name in Sarah's voice, full of pain. He squeezed his eyes shut. Each sob was like a knife in his heart, but he forced himself to keep going. As he got into the car and turned the key, he realized his hands were shaking violently. He sat in silence, the only sound being the sound of the rain on the roof. Numbly, he took out his phone. Almost without realizing why, he found Tom's contact and pressed call. "Mike." Tom answered on the second ring, sounding tense, like he was expecting a call. "Are you okay? What happened?" Michael opened his mouth, but couldn't make a sound. The lump in his throat prevented him from saying a word. "Mike," Tom's voice became sharp. "Where are you?" Michael took a deep breath. I'm in the car," he said, his voice shaking. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." Tom didn't even bother asking. He heard everything he needed to know in Michael's broken voice. Michael nodded, holding the phone to his ear, unable to speak. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. It was only under the cover of rain and darkness that he finally allowed himself to break. He gripped the steering wheel and began to sob at the betrayal, at the loss of the family he had considered his own, at the unknown future. His cries were lost in the storm as he sobbed like a man who had lost all support, each spasm cutting deep into his soul. Tom found Michael parked on a quiet street not far from his house, his hazard lights flashing. He tapped on the window with the back of his hand. Michael unlocked the door and Tom climbed into the passenger seat. One look at Michael's puffy, red eyes and haggard face told him everything. Without a word, Tom reached out and hugged him. Michael clung to his old friend, his shoulders shaking with a new wave of tears that he could no longer hold back. Tom simply held him, weathering the storm of someone else's grief. "I'm with you," he said quietly. "Cry it all out." It took a long time for Michael to be completely empty. He felt completely drained. His head was splitting, his throat was sore. Tom pulled away, looked at him carefully. "Let's go to my place. You'll spend the night with me." Michael opened his mouth to protest that he didn't want to impose, but he couldn't say anything. He realized he had nowhere else to go, certainly not home. He nodded silently. They drove through the rain to Tom's apartment in another part of town. Tom said little, sensing how fragile Michael was now. At home, he handed him a towel, a dry shirt, and sweatpants. "They will probably be too big, but it's better than walking around in wet ones." Michael was changing in the bathroom, glancing briefly at the mirror. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning, his eyes bloodshot, his face drawn and pale. He barely recognized himself. He turned away as the pain hit his chest with renewed intensity. This was not a nightmare. This was real. When he came out, Tom had already made tea and put a bottle of whiskey on the kitchen counter. "I decided it wouldn't hurt to have a choice," he said softly. Michael smiled weakly, gratefully. "Probably both." They sat in the small living room, and the only sound was the rain on the glass. After a while, Tom asked cautiously, "So, it's true?" Michael swallowed and nodded. "All of them. None of them. None of them are mine." The voice broke. The words spoken out loud tore through his chest with pain again. Tom exhaled slowly and ran his hand through his hair. "Oh my God." He looked like he couldn't believe it himself. "And Sarah, what did she say?" Michael felt anger flare up, remembering that scene. She admitted everything. His fingers tightened around the warm cup. Over the course of several minutes, he recounted in fits and starts the story. How she did it, what she explained it with, the fact that the same man was the biological father of all 3 children. Tom listened, his face tense, occasionally cursing through his teeth. I can't believe she'd do that," Tom said when the story was finished. "I always thought you had the perfect marriage. No offense, but she seemed completely devoted to you. Well, yes, Michael smiled bitterly. Apparently, loyalty has its limits. Tom shook his head. I'm not making excuses for her, Mike, I really am. But it sounds like she did it out of fear because she wanted kids with you specifically, albeit in a very sick way, not because she fell out of love with you or fell in love with someone else. Michael's eyes stung again. I don't even know what's worse. If she had cheated for love or passion, maybe at least it would have had some human meaning. But this way, she did it consciously, more than once, pretended that everything was fine. He fell silent, unable to find words for such betrayal. He took a sip of tea with whiskey, a burning warmth rolled down his throat. So what now? Tom asked quietly after a pause. Have you thought about what you're going to do? Michael looked into the dark liquid in the cup. I don't know. She asks for forgiveness. She wants to save the family. A tear rolled down his cheek before he could hold it back. But how? How can I even look at her without seeing all this? Tom put his hand on his shoulder. Loving her and being angry at her is not a contradiction. That's how feelings work. I'd be honestly surprised if you could stop loving her overnight, even after all this. I often think, just leave. Disappear. Run away from all this pain, Michael admitted. But the children. I know, Tom said. With children, it's 100 times more difficult. They fell silent, both imagining Ethan, Emily, and Jacob. They're my whole world, Michael whispered. Biology be damned. They're my children. I can't lose them, Tom. His voice faltered again. I'm afraid. What if they find out one day? Look at me differently. Think I'm not their father? The pressure on his shoulder increased. They might not understand, but they know who their dad is. It's you, and nothing will change that unless you let it. You were with them every day. That's the main thing. But it's all built on a lie, Michael said hoarsely. Her lies, not yours, Tom said softly. You didn't deceive anyone. You were the truest father I've ever seen, and no one can take away what you have between you and your children. Not even that. Michael's eyes filled with tears again. He desperately needed to believe this. I don't know how to behave in front of them. What should I say if they sense something is wrong? That's something for you and Sarah to decide, Tom said. But I wouldn't tell them everything, at least not yet. They're too young to know. If you can work it out between you, they might never have to know. Michael nodded. He thought so himself. He didn't want this poisonous secret to touch the children. They deserved purity. And if you can't forgive Sarah, Tom continued carefully, and you still decide to separate, you can still remain their father, and no one will take that right away unless you refuse it yourself. And you won't refuse it. Michael didn't even think about the legal side. His name is on all 3 of their birth certificates. He's the father in name and in life. Ironically, he could probably sue for father fraud. The story of Richard Mason came to mind. But why? To drag the kids into court and tabloids? No, never. He didn't want money or revenge. He just wanted his family back, even though he knew things would never be the same. I don't want to lose them, he repeated barely audibly. And you won't lose it, Tom said confidently, because you won't let that happen, no matter what happens between you and Sarah. They talked for a long time until Michael was overcome by fatigue. Tom unfolded the sofa, insisting that he lie down in the bedroom, but Michael refused. He did not want to kick his friend out of his own bed. Are you sure you'll be okay? Tom asked, turning off the light. Michael was already lying down, staring at the ceiling. How do you define okay? I'm alive. I'm breathing. That's all for now. Tom sighed and patted him on the shoulder. Call me if you need anything. I'll take you home in the morning, or wherever you say. Thank you, Michael replied. As Tom went to his room, Michael felt a heavy loneliness descend on him. Just yesterday, he had fallen asleep with his wife in his arms, with his children under one roof. And now, alone on a friend's couch, his whole world turned upside down. He pulled the blanket over himself, feeling both empty and searing. His thoughts went back to the children. Had Sarah been able to explain anything to them? Did they sense that something was wrong? He imagined their faces, and the pillow became wet with tears again. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness, as if sending a message across the distance to his children. "I'm still your dad. I'll always be your dad." He fell asleep with these words in his head, a desperate mantra that drove away despair. Michael arrived home early the next morning, just after dawn. Tom gave him a ride and again offered to stay with him, but Michael insisted on going in alone. This was something he had to handle on his own. His hands shook as he unlocked the front door. As he entered, he felt the silence of the awakening house. The aroma of coffee hung in the air. Soft sounds came from the kitchen. Sarah was standing there in her robe, staring absently at the toast on the counter. Hearing his footsteps, she turned around abruptly. Their eyes met, and for a moment no one spoke. Sarah's face was pale and drawn, her eyes puffy from crying the night before. Michael's heart sank despite everything. It hurt to see her suffering. She opened her mouth, perhaps to apologize again, or to ask where he had been, but then there was a thud from above. One of the children had woken up. They both froze, remembering the thin walls and sensitive ears. Sarah quickly wiped her cheeks and whispered with hope in her voice, "You're back." "For their sake," Michael answered just as quietly, tiredly. "We have to keep things normal for them, at least for a while." She nodded, understanding. "Thank you." Before they could say anything else, Jacob came running down the stairs with a loud thud, still in his dinosaur pajamas, his face lighting up when he saw Michael. "Dad," he cried, rushing towards him and hugging his legs. "Mom said you helped Uncle Tom yesterday. Did you fix everything?" Michael's throat tightened. He dropped to one knee and hugged his son tightly. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, dodging the question. "I missed you." Jacob chuckled. "You were gone for just one night, silly dad." But he hugged him tightly around the neck. Michael understood. Even one night of absence had shaken the child's world. "I'm here now," he whispered, kissing the top of his son's head. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of shampoo and morning warmth. A vow was born in his heart. He would not abandon his children. No matter what happened between him and Sarah, he would be their father and all that mattered. Emily followed him down the stairs. The 13-year-old girl looked at her father with reproach and anxiety. "Daddy, why didn't you come home?" she asked bluntly, crossing her arms. "Mommy was crying yesterday. She said everything was fine, but it wasn't, right?" Sarah inhaled sharply, about to intervene, but Michael stopped her with a gesture. He met his daughter's piercing gaze and tried to smile gently. "Your mom and we had a really tough conversation," he began carefully, "and it upset us both. But it's something we have to deal with. It's not your fault, okay? We both love you and your brothers more than anything in the world." Emily's gaze darted between her parents. She was old enough to feel the heaviness in the air, even if she didn't understand the cause. "You," she hesitated and bit her lip. "Will you and Mom be okay?" The tremor in her voice nearly broke Michael. He walked up to her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Look at me, Em," he said quietly. She lifted her chin, and he saw tears welling up in her big brown eyes. "I love your mom, and I love you, and Ethan, and Jacob. We're family. That won't change. We'll do anything to make it work. It's just that sometimes adults, they need time to figure things out. But that doesn't change how much we love you, you know?" Emily nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. Michael hugged her, and she buried her face in his chest, sobbing softly. "Promise, Dad," she whispered. His throat tightened. "I promise to always be there for you," he whispered back. It was all he could promise honestly. Over her shoulder, his gaze met Sarah's. Silent tears were streaming down her cheeks as she watched him comfort their daughter, in every sense. Michael saw a storm of regret and love in her eyes. He nodded slightly, acknowledging that for the sake of the children, they had to put their differences aside. Sarah wiped her tears and came over, hugging both Michael and Emily. Jacob quickly ran over and joined them, not quite. Soon the morning was back to normal. Ethan came downstairs, surprised but clearly relieved to see his father home, though he tried to look unconcerned. There was breakfast to make, backpacks to find, the usual weekday chaos to deal with. Michael and Sarah moved silently around the kitchen, politely coordinating their actions like well-coordinated partners. There was a fragility between them, as if one careless word could shatter the fragile peace. But the children, immersed in their routine, did not notice. After Ethan and Emily left to catch the school bus and Sarah dropped Jacob off at preschool, Michael was left alone in the house, alone with his wife again. She returned and stood across from him in the living room. The silence hung over them, thick and oppressive. "Thank you for coming back," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. "Even if it's just for them, thank you." Michael nodded briefly. He was exhausted, both physically and mentally. "We need to figure out how to move forward," he said quietly. "For them." Sarah took a cautious step forward. "I was serious. I'm ready for anything therapy, counseling, anything. I will earn your trust, even if it's the last thing I do." He looked at her, the woman he had loved for years, but now barely recognized. He could still see her as the woman he had once fallen in love with, but with the shadow of her actions. Part of him wanted to touch her cheek, wipe away a tear. Another wanted to turn away. "I don't know how long it will take me to trust you again," he admitted hoarsely, "or if I can at all." Sarah lowered her head. "I understand. But," he continued, "I'm willing to try, for now, for the kids, and," he took a deep breath, "because I took my vows seriously, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. This is probably the scariest thing that could ever happen, but if there's even a chance to get through this, I have to try, for them." A stifled sob escaped Sarah's chest. She came closer and gently took his hand in both hers. "You won't regret it," she whispered. "I swear I'll prove it to you every day. I'll never lie again. I'll live transparently, do whatever needs to be done. Just, please, don't give up on us." Michael's fingers tightened in her palm. "I can't promise anything about us right now," he said honestly. "I'm here. That's all I can give today. And tomorrow, we'll see." Sarah nodded, tears of relief mixed with sadness. "It's more than I deserve, but I'll take it. Thank you." They stood in silence. Sarah approached him cautiously, raising her arms as if to embrace him. Michael froze, but let her. He remained tense, but did not pull away when she dropped her head onto his shoulder. Her tears soaked his shirt. "We can do this," she whispered. "We can do this, because we love each other, because you're the best husband and father, and I was a fool not to realize that was enough." Michael closed his eyes. He wanted to believe her, to let her words begin to heal him. It would take time, not a day, not a month. But he knew his heart. Despite everything, he still loved her, and the children beyond measure. That love was worth fighting for, if he had any strength left in him. "It's going to be a long road," he muttered. "I can't just forgive. We're going to have a lot of difficult conversations, probably with professional help." Sarah pulled back a little to look him in the eye and nodded. "Anything," she said confidently. He studied her face full of remorse and love and nodded slightly. In the weeks that followed, the Walkers began a painful, fragile process of healing. They found a couples therapist and began attending sessions twice a week. There, Michael would release his pain and anger, and Sarah would listen, cry, and admit her guilt without apology. It was excruciating, but necessary. At home, they maintained unity in front of the children. There were nights when Michael slept in the spare room, unable to share her bed. The nightmares returned too often. Sarah accepted this, bidding him good night each time and telling him she loved him, even if he did not answer. Over time, the nightmares began to subside, and he began to return to their bedroom more often, though sometimes he lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Sarah tossed and turned restlessly beside him. He didn't distance himself from his fatherly duties. Instead, he became even more involved, enthusiastically coaching Jacob in the Little League, helping Emily prepare for the school play, taking Ethan on long walks just to talk. Every "thank you, Dad," Every smile from the kids was both joy and pain, a reminder that they were his, no matter what, even if not by blood, by essence. One Saturday afternoon, a couple of months after that fateful discovery, Michael sat on a park bench, watching Ethan and Emily throw a frisbee to each other and Jacob climb around the playground. The park was much the same as the one where his world had ended. But today the air was crisp, filled with the scent of spring and the sounds of children, and there was a heaviness in his chest that was new as well as heavy. Sarah sat next to him. She was silent, but her eyes never left the children. After a while, she cautiously extended her hand, a gesture that had once been natural, but now required fragile courage. Michael looked at her. He did not pull his hand away. On the contrary, he intertwined his fingers with hers. Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with a quiet happiness. Michael smiled back, weakly. It wasn't a perfect moment, the pain was still there, heavy and not quite gone. But it was a step, a silent sign that maybe they could walk this path together. He looked at his children, his true self. And in his chest, there once again spread that feeling he had once been afraid of losing. Love, deep, unconditional, stronger than all doubts. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked softly, squeezing his hand a little tighter. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air enter and fill his lungs, as if cleansing him from the inside. "I'm fine," he said, and at that moment he really felt it. It wasn't the naive, carefree, "I'm fine," he would have given before everything that had happened. It was the fragile, hard one, "I'm fine" of a man who had been through fire and not broken. A man whose heart was wounded, but who continued to love. Who didn't run, but slowly, step by step, rebuilt his life. He looked at Sarah, the woman he loved and who had betrayed him. But he still saw her as someone he wanted to be with again, if she kept fighting, if he kept believing. He didn't know what was next for them. Whether they had a chance of a full recovery, no one could say. But he knew two things for sure. He loved his children immensely, and he would always be their father, no matter the secrets or the blood. That couldn't be taken away from him. And Sarah, he still loved her too. Somewhere deep beneath the pain, the love hadn't disappeared. And if they could rebuild trust, brick by brick, he was willing to try. That was real love, not the kind that's flawless, but the kind that can fall, break, and be restored. He was distracted from his thoughts when Jacob noticed them on the bench and rushed towards them, flushed and beaming with joy. "Mom, Dad, did you see? I walked along all the rungs myself," he exclaimed, running up. Michael picked him up and sat him on his lap. "I saw it. You were just awesome," he said with a smile, ruffling the boy's hair. Jacob beamed with pride. Sarah wrapped her arms around Michael's back and rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, it felt right. "We love you so much, baby," Michael said quietly to Jacob. His and Sarah's eyes met over their son's head. "We both love you, always." And in that moment, under the soft light of the midday sun, surrounded by his children and wife, Michael felt something new growing inside him. Hope. Hope that, with time, through honesty, work, and love, they could create something new and lasting. Not what had been before, that was gone, but something of his own, vulnerable, but real. They sat, embracing, like a family wounded by betrayal, but bound together by a love stronger than blood. The road ahead was long, but they were ready to walk it together, step by step to healing and new life. And subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.